the big end of town, as I like to call it, there's such a disconnect of understanding of what's actually happening. I've been really fortunate in the role that I'm playing and is to just participate in conversations and bring that voice of small back to the table. That was an interesting point that did come about was our farmers and producers need to be invited. It's like, no, absolutely. They have to be owning the table. They are the table.
Strategies in business for a world in flux. In this next season, I am predominantly focusing on the women in my community, particularly the ecological community, but there are other sectors, and how they have navigated their way in life, some up and down, and others in a remarkably direct way, and how that maybe differs from the way our male counterparts have operated in business. I hope you enjoy these strategies and their journeys throughout life. Welcome. Hello and welcome to Integration. Today, I'm going to interview Nicole McNaughton, and she heads up the start of my series on women, because I have realized I have interviewed a couple of women, but the majority of the people in my last season just happen to be men. I know a lot of men in my circle. And then I thought, why don't I look around for all the amazing kick-ass women in this space? So I met the lovely Nicole at the Farmers for Climate Action conference, of which there were a lot of amazing women actually in the space. Nicole's background is primarily around getting communities together and working on ecosystems. And I would say food sovereignty. So in Australia, we grow an enormous amount of food. You'd think that we would be a bounteous basket of food, yet we seem to export it all and then import everybody else's junk. So not that it's junk meant to be like that, but we do grow some beautiful food and we send it everywhere else. And we seem to like to get the cheapest food because we can. I recently interviewed Austral Fisheries, and they were saying 70% of all our fish, even though we have the third largest fishing area in the world, 70% of our fish is from international unmonitored waters because it's cheap, because they don't have a regulation of it. And we do like cheap. It is the nature of humans to want the cheapest thing possible. And no matter how much you talk about sustainability and all the rest of things, it doesn't seem to translate to the dollar. And on that note, therefore, those of us that are working towards a better world have to keep finding resilient ways to be more and more innovative. And on that note, I introduced the lovely Nicole and some of her journey in working towards that coalition of the willing, shall we say.
Hello, Samantha. It's lovely to see you again. And it was great to meet you at that amazing Farmers for Climate Action conference last week, I think it was. Yeah.
Did you learn a lot at it? Was it new for you, that stuff?
I did. I have the great privilege of working with businesses and members across the whole food value chain. So absolutely a lot of producers. Some of the stats that were shared were incredibly sobering in terms of the actual impact of climate change on our agricultural industry. But what I did take away from the conference was the fact that there are so many passionate, amazing, resilient farmers who have a genuine desire to do good and understand their role that they play in the stewardship of our land, and being amongst a like-minded tribe of businesses who shared similar ethoses to what I have personally was very energizing. I think, you talk about resilience. I think being able to tap into groups like that and connect with like-minded people absolutely helps build resilience.
Yeah. It's, for me, the interesting thing in talking to you is that you aren't focused, as my network is pretty much all regenerative and organic, and feel a lot of the time like I'm talking in an echo chamber. So it was interesting for me because it was, particularly the survey was over 8,500 farmers across Australia, not even in the climate space, and how uniform the responses were, like good 70 or 80%.
Yeah.
Were pretty much in agreement and had experienced things, because I often talk to farmers, particularly the older farmers. They say, well, we've always had droughts, or, oh, yeah, we've always had this. And so it's interesting to see that there is a bit more uniformity of experience being expressed in that. And as you do work in the food chain across the board, what do you sort of hearing along the lines in terms of, let's say, businesses being able to get supply? Because I do think that's going to be the critical juncture of where we get change.
Goodness, where do we start? Look, I think generally speaking, since COVID, there's been massive issues in supply chain, impacts of climate change, cost of living, cost of inputs. It's this litany of challenges that our food industries had to face since COVID and before COVID for many different reasons as well. Obviously, climate change in the context of what we're talking about is being top of top. Yeah. But it's what I would generally say is absolutely it's incredibly difficult for our food industry, has been for a while. And we all know the reasons why, like I've just mentioned. I think probably what I like to shine a light on in these types of conversations, though, is absolutely it's incredibly difficult. It's very challenging. The majority of the members that I work with and the majority of the food industry as a whole are small business. So, how do you navigate this world and all of those challenges when you're small? But yeah, circling back is I think what we also need to amplify and shine a light on is the resilience of our industry and the passion and the sheer bloody mindedness of these businesses, farmers, producers, makers, growers in what they do. I guess a lot of what I've been doing lately is doing exactly that, but also kind of going, how do we as consumers, how do we as stakeholders, how do we as government understand that and support them more and help them become more resilient?
So where are you seeing pain points that you might say are areas of innovation and ingenuity that is making those pain points go away or become pivot points or
Yeah. Yeah. So pain points, as I said, supply chain, the fragility of our supply chain, whether it's receiving inputs and then kind of being able to actually supply out as well.
just the more accessibility of them.
Both. Great examples kind of post-COVID and a couple of years ago was, a lot of our smaller manufacturers being able to actually access packaging and glass bottles because they were all held up in shipping ports. Then, so accessibility and cost of, but then also distribution. So cost of freight and diesel has meant that cost of distribution has skyrocketed as well. So coupled with that is obviously cost of living crisis. So, and you referenced it before, we like cheap in Australia. So what's the first thing that doesn't go in your shopping basket when you're facing cost of living pressures? It's the artisan, handmade, local product. We're going for the white label, mass consumer made, imported product as consumers. Although there is a lot of talk about supporting local, the realities are those products don't go in your shopping baskets. So there's that. There's the rising difficulty of just navigating all of those challenges, but then also all of the regulations and just actually doing business and gaining market access. We know we're all very aware of the duopoly of the food system and the retail system. So how do small producers get on the shelves of these supermarkets? And that's a whole podcast in itself.
Are you seeing a lot more, because I'm talking to another food sovereignty person soon, but are you seeing more startup areas around getting direct from farmer to consumer?
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's absolutely, certainly in some of the smaller groups, and I should probably go into who we are and what we do to give you some context in a minute. But absolutely, there has been that pivot, and you talk about innovation. So there's been a growing realization that, getting into the majors is not necessarily the growth trajectory for a lot of business. So we're seeing a lot more businesses going online, going into food service, going back to markets and kind of trying to control their own destiny with how they actually get their product to market, whether that be producers and or makers.
A few of them that go to market, in fact, they tried going online, and some do partially online, but it's actually more expensive and more difficult for them to do online. They can physically take it, even if they drive many hours. Most farmers I know drive at least 2 or 3 hours to get it. try and find someone to stay the night with and then drive back again in the cities, because people
Yeah.
do forget about the distance that.
Absolutely. And kind of having the diversity of those channels as well. And then there's other platforms. I work here locally with an amazing woman in Moreton Bay who has imported from Scandinavia the idea of REKO rings. It's REKO, where smaller producers in a smaller location put their wares on a Facebook page, and then every Saturday the products are actually pre-purchased. And so then every Saturday they convene at a central spot. The customers come by and they've bought lettuce from here and gin from here and this from here. And the producers all stand there and convene and then hand them their products as they drive by. So that kind of micro.
Actually, through COVID, and they were doing it in parking lots.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
went to several places all
Yeah.
together to put it into one van,
Yeah.
like a shop out of the back of a van. I just wondered if how regulators love to get in the way of that sort of stuff, because it's like a free shop, and so someone will get up in arms about it and stop that.
Yeah.
Are you finding that sort of resistance to it coming from?
Not necessarily here locally. And I guess that's kind of where groups like ours and what we try and foster, and it's probably the segue into what I do. So I work with an organisation called FAN, Food and Agribusiness Network, here on the Sunshine Coast, but we've got members throughout southeast Queensland. So Moreton Bay, Gympie, Noosa, Sunshine Coast. We've got many members in Brisbane. As I said, we work with members. We've got about 500 members now across the whole food value chain. So from pineapple farmers, custard apple growers, brewers, distillers, chocolate makers, cheese makers. I do say that I have the best stock pantry in Queensland, which is true. But we exist to be a conduit of connection for our members. So, and the majority of which are small, so small to medium producers, which is the majority of the food and beverage industry in Australia as a whole. And we connect those members with local government initiatives, with each other, with programs, with opportunities, with information. We create programs for them based on partnerships. We run events to introduce them to buying opportunities. We're a sounding board at the end of the phone, especially during COVID and floods and issues like that. But we are that conduit of connection. So being able to have partnerships so we have partnerships in place with Moreton Bay Councils, Noosa Council, Sunshine Coast Council here locally, with all different levels of all different departments of state government. And with those relationships, we're kind of able to bring stakeholders and in different parts of council along on the journey with initiatives like that as well. So it's bringing together all of the key players of the ecosystem to work together towards a common goal, which in this case is supporting our local food and agribusiness industry.
Mm. So for people that don't know anything about Australia that listen to this podcast, she's talking about in Australia food basket. It's a more tropical region of Australia in the north, as opposed to people in the, let's say America would probably say Florida might be similar sort of.
Yeah.
Or a little bit of California, but it's very wet up there.
It is. So our part of the world, you'll see an image here of pineapples in the background and our beautiful Glasshouse Mountains. Absolutely a subtropical environment. It's Queensland as a whole, which is the state that we're in, very much a food basket for Australia, food bowl, with a lot of diversity of what we grow and graze. But also in our part of the world, we do have a lot of value adders, but in the artisan space. So we also like to say that we're Queensland's Sunshine Pantry. So we produce and make a lot of beautiful craft beer, and there's a lot of amazing gin and rum distilled in this part of the world.
We're such big alcohol drinker.
Well, interesting fact here as well for you. any of your New Zealand viewers, I will boldly claim that the Sunshine Coast is actually the home of pavlovas. And it's a legitimate claim I can back up because we are home to Country Chef Bakery, which makes more pavlovas than pretty much anywhere in the world.
Pavlova, the singer or something that came up?
The ballerina.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I like to say that our part of the world is prawns, pineapples, and pavlovas, and so much more. So,
The three.
yeah, yeah, incredibly diverse. But I guess again, kind of looping in the theme of resilience, what we do as an organization is build that ecosystem, is build that network to help build resilience within the members' businesses, but also the region and the industry as itself. So when we were speaking offline before, I say that I like to call myself a cow farmer, cow being coalition of the willing, and no disrespect to any actual cow farmers. And I work with many, especially in the regen space, but a lot of what I do is bring together and foster that coalition of the willing to make good things happen. And I think that's, again, a key outtake of the conference that you and I attended was Farmers for Climate Action. We're really able to bring together that coalition of the willing from the grassroots and the mud boots to key stakeholders and key influencers to build something together. And that was incredibly energizing.
I think that's the thing that in this time of, shall we say, disassociation with all the things happening in America, the polarization in Australia, well, from COVID all the way through, we've got this lack of unity. And I think people are craving unity, anything that brings people together. Like there were things in the conference we attended that I vehemently disagree with. I just had to leave the room.
Yeah.
But I am so pleased that it's at least a step in the right direction. I just spent a day or 3 days getting there, but up in the border of New South Wales and Queensland, where apart from the fact that it rained the entire time, there were farmers from all over the East Coast, from Adelaide right through long distances, and big croppers with tens of thousands of hectares. And for me, from a climate point of view, they're critical to change their mindset. And I'd gone because it had the word regen in the title. There was nothing regenerative going on, but it was still the fact that they're trying to think that way. And the sponsor was looking for supplies really from the point of view of security, food security, that if you don't change what they're doing because of things like you said, like the rising cost of inputs, well, the farmer they're walking off the land. I saw you had a post just recently where you posted how many people surveyed would get out, particularly in the space, if they could sell it tomorrow, they would. And all the farmers I talked to, they say the same thing. It's not just that they're getting old and they don't want to do it anymore. It's that their children don't want to take it over, and they don't want their children to because the margins are too small.
Absolutely.
Staying in them as a business, and people don't realize how critical that is.
Absolutely. I see it firsthand. I've seen it firsthand here locally. Where I live here on the Sunshine Coast was all strawberry fields up until 5 years ago, where they just all closed down because it was just too difficult for them. And it's really timely, actually, because this evening we're going to the local school's strawberry festival, which they still have. No strawberries. Thankfully, they have a partnership with Queensland Strawberries, which is amazing. But I've seen firsthand, I mean, when my boys were little, we were able to take them up the road and pick strawberries. It was such an amazing opportunity for my boys to see where food is actually grown and then experience the joy of going and picking. And actually, we'd drive by every day going, oh, it's almost strawberry time. We'd follow the progress of the plantation, and that's no longer there because it wasn't viable for the farmers to do it. They've turned it all into turf, and the loss of that to the community, the loss of that to the local school, the loss of that connection for consumers. Don't even get me started on, all of the land in our urban cities being taken over. It is dire. It is absolutely dire. And that's just the production side. Then if you look into the value add side of it, where, as you say, and I also posted recently about exactly the tuna and the fishing, we import all of this seafood, yet we have some of the most amazing seafood and that gets sent offshore. And that's not for lack of trying by a lot of local producers. And I actually am proud to say that there's 2 lots of tuna here in Queensland that I know of that is on the local supermarkets, but just too expensive to actually process it locally. So it has to go offshore. So,
Because we've been a bit spoiled for products. There's a number of factors in that. I mean, the big, particularly Asian markets that literally have floating factories go outside the legal limits of the nations and basically plunder the ocean with no oversight, market and pack it because they're big enough to do so.
yeah.
At a fraction of the cost we can do it. We buy it because it's cheap, but we don't know what the devastation to the ecosystem and our future ability to breathe is being unwittingly done. Yet I will say I interviewed Austral Fisheries CEO David Carter, and he was talking about how they had been campaigning, I think it was with the Queensland community, it might have been Northern Territory. Anyway, they had significant inroads of getting one state, so I think it is Queensland, but I'm not sure, you can verify that, where they were able to get it mandated at the government level that the place of origin, which is imported frozen goods in supermarkets, but isn't on restaurants. And a lot of people eat seafood out.
Yeah.
I'm one of them. I rarely buy seafood. I generally will only eat it out. And he said people had argued in this campaigning for many years that people wouldn't buy it. It's expensive. And they found the exact opposite, that people, when they knew this fish that was much cheaper was from wherever and this fish was local, they'd buy the local one. They did want to support it because when you're going out, you are generally spending a bit more to go out. So, I certainly would do that. I do hope that gets through nationally. And I certainly want to raise that awareness for anybody listening in any country. You need to be supporting at your local eatery as well, where the place of origin is for the food that you eat. And there's some sort of traceability as to how it's been procured, how it's been harvested, how it's been grown, because it's your future. Every single meal you eat is your future, that if it's not in a sustainable way. And that was what was interesting even in the open fishery. You'd think of farm fishing, which is so controlled, would be the one, because farm fishing is now 50% of global protein. That's wild. That's way above what we think it is. And there's almost no monitoring, particularly in the Asian countries. In West Australia, where they have a license to do a certain region of the ocean, it's in their interest to make sure the ocean continues to be as healthy and regenerative, and the entire ecosystem is probably the ultimate regenerative system because they're making sure it's clean and there's ongoing fish supply through the way they steward the area. And that stewardship, a lot of farmers that I spoke to recently in this thing, they regard they are stewarding, but there's not necessarily an awareness of how deep that is or what the thing they're doing is affecting those things around them, working little bubbles.
And I think that's kind of very, what's the word I'm looking for? That pretty much describes our whole food system, though. We're incredibly siloed.
Yes.
It's incredibly fragmented. It's incredibly siloed. It's the connections between what's happening at the coalface and what's happening at, the grassroots mud boots level, and then what's being discussed in national conversations, especially in the R&D and the innovation and the big end of town, as I like to call it. There's such a disconnect of understanding of what's actually happening. And I guess that's probably where I've been really fortunate in the role that I'm playing and some of the opportunities that I've had and through opportunities like this is to just participate in conversations and bring that voice of small back to the table. And that was an interesting point that did come about, was the notion of our farmers and producers need to be invited. It's like, no, absolutely, they have to be owning the table. They are the table. And for me personally, being able to represent the voice of small, we need to be at that table. We need to be shaping that conversation. We need to be, absolutely driving it, because without that insight, it's just lots of noise. So, yeah.
So, Agri-Futures is that you work for, don't you, as well?
So, no, I don't work for Agri-Futures, but I am the 2025 Queensland Agri-Futures Rural Women's Award winner.
Oh, so it was.
So, yes, I feel very humbled and honoured to be representing Queensland this year as the Rural Women's Award winner, in partnership with 6 other amazing women from obviously the other states who are doing some phenomenal things in their states. And I guess being able to use that platform and also those connections into that ecosystem has been really invaluable, because, again, a lot of what I do is being a cow farmer and kind of bringing together the coalition of the willing to work on meaningful, impactful things for our industry.
And tell me, is it actually impacting those bigger voices? Because I do find the blokes tend to the big blokes doing the big farming over the big areas that brings in the big money. Littler area is difficult to get that voice in. Are they listening to you?
That's a very good question. Look, I would say absolutely pockets. And yes, absolutely. I'm getting invited to sit in on lots of interesting conversations, and trying to kind of say in those conversations, hey, have you connected with these guys over here, or have you heard what's going on over here? And invariably they haven't. So that's nice to be able to bring that together. I do find that I tend to gravitate towards a lot of amazing women who like to get stuff done.
Rather than talk about it.
Well, yeah, and stuff is the non-swear word way of saying it. We like to, there's an unofficial team GSD out there, get done. And there are a lot of regional or remote women, and interestingly, I get to see them at these conferences and events. And I saw one of these amazing women recently, and she said, Nick, it was great to catch up. It was like an unofficial board meeting of Team GSD. And I went, yeah, absolutely, because we just don't have time. We just want to get on and make good things happen. So they're the tribe that I find and try and connect with and find energy in. And I have to say the Rural Women's Award alumni through Agri-Futures is definitely that group of women.
The sort of more movers and shakers behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Talking and doing nothing.
We just get on and support each other and use the opportunities where we can, and the soft influence where we can. But it is just very much a case of let's just get on and do it.
Which is really why I decided to do this series on the women behind the scenes, because they're not really behind anything. They're the CEOs and forerunners of a lot of things. They're just not, shall we say, in the news or being celebrities about the whole thing. And I think that's an interesting point that we don't maybe realise, is that the masculine and the feminine are very different qualities. Even in organising women to do this, a lot of them just, oh, I'm too busy. I don't want to do that, and they don't really want to be in the forefront.
Yeah.
They talk them into being in a spokesman-y position.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to be talking about it. Go and talk to that person over there. And I'm like, you've just done extraordinary things.
Yeah.
So I'm getting Lucinda on. He was like, oh, I suppose you could talk to me. I've been, how many years has that woman been chairing and founding and getting stuff happening? And I'm like, well, I really feel people should hear what they can do too, because there are a lot of women that maybe don't realise that the power in their particular feminine ability is, and that there is a coalition of women willing.
And of women as well.
Coalition of willing women. And they're not, because sometimes there's this sort of sisterhood, and then other times they're kind of all attacking each other. And I feel in this area where it's about nature and food sovereignty and survival, family, it's a little bit more, what would you say, differences are put aside. Yeah. I suppose particularly as I'm sort of delving a little bit more into the conventional side, I feel that their time will come where they'll want to hear those of us that are doing this other thing, because the soil will keep collapsing. But like, it's really becoming hydroponic. They're really a bunch of chemicals in a substrate that's holding the plant up. But, you know, it's difficult. You've just got to hold your breath and just keep plodding ahead. Yeah. So what do you think are the inspiring things that you work with to change mindsets or help move the dial in whatever it is that you're passionate about in your cow?
It's a great question. And probably not answering your question, but kind of coming back to the idea of regenerative farming. I have the absolute privilege of knowing so many great people in this space, including Tim and Amber Scott from Kandanga Farm, a K2 boss up in the Mary Valley, Gympie Way, absolute guns in this. Tim is a no bullshit farmer who calls a spade, and Amber, his beautiful wife, is just the heart and soul of that community. But I reference them because they've been really instructive in terms of the technical side of regenerative farming. But Amber in particular really talks to the idea of regenerative farming as not only just being about the soil, it's about actually regenerating the community around the farm. And she goes into it great in detail, and you should absolutely interview her at some stage because she explains it so much better. But that notion of regenerating the community through a farming practice and through education and through stewardship of the land is so powerful, and something that I think we can take on board as ecosystems as well. As how do we build good practice? How do we be stewards of our regions, of our community, to regenerate, in this instance, the food system? And we do that by building a community of like-minded people, by finding your tribe, by kind of understanding that you're not alone in that journey as well, which I think is, we in the agriculture sector, we know that the great issues around mental health and the challenges for mental health in the agricultural industry are just terrifying, huge. It's the same with the value add industry. So being able to connect with groups on the ground, groups like ours, communities like that, where you understand that you're not alone, is also incredibly powerful.
Is there any areas where they're interacting more, like I'll do this part of the product and you do this part, and we co-supply to get this end product, like more growing so that it's isolated?
Absolutely. And that's a lot of what we try and here is that collaboration. So whether it be collaboration around developing new products or solving solutions together, we have a closed fan member page, for instance, and the most recent one that was up there yesterday was a mushroom farmer looking for local sugarcane farm to look for mulch for their substrate for farming. So they reached out, and within like 5 minutes, there was 5 replies back, all saying, "Speak to Kylie at Canefields who does this." So, it's incredibly simple and basic, but being able to create that community where people go, "Oh, I need this. Who do I talk to?" Or, "I've got this issue. Has anyone else got that?" That's what we foster, and there absolutely needs to be more of that. And that does happen. It really does happen.
Do you find, because of COVID and the international shipping thing, and because we're so isolated here, such big distances with such large volumes of product, did you find the packaging thing, did people start looking at ways to do packaging in Australia to cut the cost of that?
Honestly, packaging is such that's a big hairy beast as well. And especially if you throw in the idea of sustainable packaging, and sustainable packaging access for small producers. Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of kind of shared solutions. So we know one of our really big distillers here buys in bulk and can kind of access that and then supplies it to the smaller distillers. So there's that kind of collaborative model.
Manufacturing packaging, like innovation in the actual creation of the packaging and being done locally.
Very difficult because of the production costs and the minimum quantity orders. So there's absolutely the appetite, but just the realities and the costs involved of doing that are really difficult, to be honest. And again, it's one that keeps coming up.
Think that I mean, I've only touched on packaging, but I keep seeing some quite interesting stuff being done at literally garage level and using, equipment like, there's, 3D printing and using stuff, machines that you can buy. I've researched them myself because I was looking at secular textiles with my son was doing it as business during COVID, and just even something like creating rope and from hemp leftovers from decorticated material of the stem and doing it on farm, with a machine that was about a few $1,000s from China, and then turning it into rope, turning it into this, and the farmer wanting to do that. They had the shed, they had it, wasn't expensive to buy the equipment. And I thought, I just think there's got to be more of that innovation going in the packaging space globally, where the machines themselves are made at such a multiple number level that it's cheap to bring in and have lots. And I think there's going to be a lot more stuff done on farm. So I want to have the farmer just farm, but you've got a community. So somebody else comes on farm on a shed and does part of the packaging, because that was what the hemp farmer I was talking to wanted to do. He managed to get all the farmers in the area to go hemp. He was already doing seed. He developed his own way of extending the stalk and making the herd, which makes thousands of things. It's just one of those products that goes on and on. But he wanted to do all those add-on product manufacturing on farm and then just have it shipped. I was costing like rope, let's say, as an item, is made cactus in Mexico where the labor is incredibly cheap. So I couldn't get the price down, even with really cheap. But wow, it was very hard to get it cheap enough to do the volumes that people wanted.
Exactly. And what you've said there is the fundamental issue with, I think, our food system is the ability to scale. Absolutely. We talk about ag tech and ag innovation, and at a farming level, there is just so much innovation, but then the ability to scale that's where it's difficult, because that's where the costs, legalities, the logistics, how do you take...
The money in Australia is terrible. Because they want such high returns on the money, incredibly conservative money in Australia, because I'm sort of in that space a little bit internationally. And there's just no appetite for any risk. And when you're talking farming, we have a very small market. So unless you're doing it pretty much at cost on farm, there isn't enough margin in it for the investment of all that, even done it locally. So I sort of wondered if things would go. I've seen things like people using banana peels and vine wrappers and things that are waste products, where it might have 1 or 2 days and it could ship to a local supermarket or a local grocery store or something, but not much else.
It's that, but then it's that ability to actually scale and commercialize it and scale, that therein lies the gap. So in another project that I'm working on, we are working with some federal government funding to support businesses with innovative new to market products or services. And some of the innovation that's coming out is just next level. And I spoke to a packaging one recently. The issue that they're all facing is exactly that, the ability to take that idea, prototype, MVP, which in most instances has a genuine problem to solve, to commercialize it and scale it. So there's an absolute challenge there for that translation of innovation into products for businesses to use.
Because we've still got the tyranny of distance in our country.
Oh, and the tyranny of distance, and then the tyranny of adoption, and so many issues. But again, kind of coming back to it's a big, hairy challenge. How do we solve it? It's reducing that fragmentation across the system. It's working at a place-based level, like what we're doing, to kind of understand the pain points locally and be able to bring those bigger opportunities into a place-based where it can be adopted, and then be able to really represent back those challenges of what's happening to this level.
And what do you see are the critical points that will make a difference to that? Like, where do you see what could happen? Is it different brainstorming across different industries? Like, I look at your pineapples back there, and they're all a source of bromelain, which I understand boiled up with cinnamon and ginger or something becomes this incredible medicinal drink for all these issues, which are chronic medical problems in Australia. Could cross-contaminate between medical solutions and industrial agricultural solutions. I'm just wondering, where are you seeing those cross-reference points that need more airtime?
There's absolutely a movement around the need for a national food policy strategy coordinating group, whatever you want to call it, that is really informed by industry and is really looking at the whole food value chain. So, and if I kind of state really simply, especially for your international audience, at the moment, we've got 3 levels of government. So as a food producer, you have to deal with 30 plus different levels of action from the 3 levels of government. There's no kind of coordinated approach to what food security, food sovereignty, what our actual food story is. And it's very much pre and post farm gate. So, it's agriculture as a commodity market, and then the value add side of it's kind of farmed out to different departments. So there's no cohesiveness in what our food system looks like. It's incredibly fragmented, and that's at this big macro level. But then, what does that look like from the grassroots level is, as a small producer, you're dealing with, as I said, all 3 levels of government with 30 plus different legislations, regulations. There is a wealth of opportunity and programs out there for producers, for value adders from all 3 levels of government. But at times they're kind of like competing. There's so much duplication. So again, as a small producer, you can access so much government support and opportunities, but there's so much of it. How do you understand what's out there? There's no cohesiveness to it. So
See a way of fixing that?
yeah, there's absolutely, as I said, there is a growing movement and understanding that there needs to be, as I said, a national food strategy, food coordinating body, food looking at the food system as a whole.
In government, they're talking to you about that. They're actually...
There's a food strategy consultation out at the moment. There's been some great work done by CSIRO. There's been some other great work. So there's pockets of conversations that are all starting to coalesce to some degree. There's also impact investors and kind of the civil society looking into it as well. So there's absolutely bigger conversations going on. How they coalesce and how they come together, I think, requires industry leadership, requires that kind of coordinating of that willing and kind of getting that movement happening. And look, I'm an eternally optimistic person. So I'm hopeful that there will be enough momentum to build towards this. But I think what's really important at that table is the voice of small.
It's interesting you say that, because in this conference I was just at yesterday, one of the speakers was, I think, also one of the sponsors, a big international company. He voiced about problem about he was trying to solve. And I went up to him in the break and said, oh, well, actually, we're working on something for a totally different product that might correlate. You might be able to work with it. And then about, I don't know, 2-3 hours later, another speaker stood up who was from government. He already had this product done. And the guy was sitting behind me at the time, and he went, how come I've never seen that? He's in a position needing that product that's already made, that I was like, oh, maybe we can do something for you. And I thought, that's just terrible. Product that they put all the time and effort into making, because it's massive. It's one of those transparency things where you track from A to B, which everybody's wanting tracking.
Yeah.
And then when you're an export, import or whatever, you've got all these different countries with all their different requirements, which is a nightmare for everybody. It's same information, but into 50 different, he was saying one company, every different one will have a sustainability to be 35 pages. No, it's not to do 35 pages of inputs. And with AI and all these things that can fix this, you're like, why are they making that big hoo-ha at a government level saying, we've already done it, everyone. Hey, look, we've got this for you. And I went, oh my
Oh,
God, we're so
yeah.
complicating something really so simple.
Yep. And that happens in all three levels of government and between everyone's very silent, even in the research world as well. It's kind of, I can't tell you how many kind of connections I'm making in the background from all of these levels going, I really think you need to speak to that person because they've kind of done something like that before.
And you're wasting hours and weeks and years.
And money.
And money.
Money. So, but look, that's, I guess, the nature of bureaucracy, isn't it? So, meanwhile, industry is just going on, going, we just need to get on and get stuff done. So, yeah, again, which is why having the voice of industry, having the voice of small in all of these conversations is incredibly important because being able to say, hey guys, research, why would we spend $200,000 on research when we can spend that on a new oven which helps us scale? But then conversely, it's kind of saying back to industry, this is the importance of research and how it can help you. So, and again, that's kind of a lot of what we try and do here locally.
So I think it's people like you being able to put the communication to connect the dots.
Conduit of connections.
See, government seems to be obsessed with research. I've been in this space since 2005, and the number of times is that we need another study. We do not need a study.
No, honestly, yeah.
Stop spending the money on research. It's always about keeping the universities alive. But I like, no, you need to be better at marketing and communicating what's here.
Yeah.
With each other, with industry, with stakeholders.
Yeah.
We all need to know what's actually there, what we can access. So we can, even if we pay a fee for it, we can do it. It'll become cheaper in larger numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm with you about that.
Yeah. And then conversely, having the research world understand, and there's pockets of it, and I'm seeing slowly the understanding that they need to understand the realities of industry and their pain points and their challenges to actually better tailor and develop that research for industry needs. So, basic understanding of researchers talking to industry to understand what that looks like. So it's all a big question.
I'm always a big picture person, and I'm very interested in bringing people together for them to see that they are not alone. There's a lot of amazing people out there absolutely working on, what did David call it? Wicked problems. And these wicked issues, these wicked problems that seem insurmountable. I believe in the collective consciousness and that brilliant ideas are out there everywhere. I mean, farmers, my God, they're just extraordinarily innovative. Many of them have, particularly Australian individuals, work so isolated and have to solve problems. They can't call up the mechanic or the this or the that. They have to fix it themselves because they're just too far away from anybody.
They're genuine innovators.
So they're pretty extraordinary. So I do see that's what really differentiates Australians from pretty much every other country is we are isolated. So someone like you that's bringing those people together, those dots together is, I think, wonderful.
You're a cow farmer as well, Sam.
I must be a cow farmer. I didn't realize I was a cow farmer.
I know. We're all cow. No, but you touched on a point before, and it's something that we talk about a lot in the academic kind of theory of what clusters are, which is how we identify as ourselves, is it's the wicked problem. It's the burning platform. And in this case, it's our burning nation. So how is it that we get that coalition of the willing or that tribe or that group of innovative businesses who are willing to give it a red hot go to address that burning platform or that wicked challenge? And that, it's not going to be overnight. It's a long, you need to chip away at it. And I think the realization that I've had lately and one of the skill sets that I have is how do you maintain that energy for those people who are in that coalition of the willing, who are the people who get it done? How do you maintain that positivity and that energy to keep fighting, to keep trying to solve that big wicked problem? So, and that's, I think, a really big challenge. But again, tapping back into groups and like-minded people is so important, and what can keep us going.
So if there was anything you could, let's say, out there as one of the biggest things you would like to move the dial on for yourself in terms of that connection, that communication, and getting people to be aware that aren't aware, what would that be? To contact you? What's your area?
Oh, that's a great question. So I guess for anyone listening, a general takeaway would be find that local group, find your own tribe. There are so many amazing, great, passionate, local, place-based groups out there doing great things. Find your tribe if you genuinely want to be involved and make that change. Step outside the comfort zone for women in particular, and not be afraid to actually talk about what you do and yourself. I'm saying that and I'm having to do it myself. Talking about myself is also me stepping outside of my comfort zone, because again, that goes back to going, I'm not alone. I realize that there's other people out there who are doing it. That gives me energy. So that's, at a really, really practical level. But then I guess my big takeaway would be funding for groups like ours to do what we do. Honestly, I operate at two such different levels. I operate at a grassroots level, kind of connecting and scraping to get the money to keep our organization going. At the same time, I'm sitting on the table on national conversations and doing all of this, but there's no funding for groups like ours to do what we do. And it's so incredibly important, because we are amplifying back up. We're creating those connections. So yeah,
The people that you're helping, like even small tokenization of information that would, because it's obviously you pay for something you get value out of.
yeah, yeah,
I see that. I know the farmer is asked to pay for everything, but every individual has to have a livelihood and can't do it on nothing. So there must be a small enough amount of money. And I say that because I happen to talk quite a lot to ChatGPT about this. There must be a small enough metric where it's petty cash to some and it's massive for others. And so
absolutely.
it's about finding where is that minimum,
Yeah,
whether it's the farmer, supplier, like this thing I went to was Asahi beer. I was saying, why, if you're looking at this metric, which I thought was a fairly small metric that they were funding, why are you not at the very least looking at what effect that's happening on all these other things that you claim are sustainable? Like, oh, they're not funding for that. If they gave us the funding for it, we do, because they had billions of data points.
yeah.
That's just extraordinary. But, like, there's only so many hours in the day one person can do it. So I thought, so really that's up to someone like me, let's say, who may be in the conversation with not necessarily as me, but somebody in that stakeholder position to say, well, why don't you get these data points? It's not like there isn't the people there to do it. It's not going to cost you that much money.
Yeah.
Put somebody on to do that. And this is the return metric it'll get you. So it's about getting the minimum turnover for the maximum amount for your buck. What is the return on that information for you?
And it's applying that entrepreneurial mindset to traditional models, which is what we are. So, and I think that kind of goes for everyone. Is there needs to be that entrepreneurial thinking in terms of diversifying market streams and market channels, and that's the same for organisations like ours as well.
Put it out there that a small fractionalized tokenomic amount, that is, let's say you say so many tokens gets you, an hour of conversation from me or half an hour, whatever it is, and you can amass them and then turn them in for maybe a bartered good or something else. And somewhere the token comes back to you as actual dollars. But there's lots of different ways to break down tit for tat that gives a value add that people want. So worth you thinking that through from a business point of view for yourself. I don't know if that helps, but
Entrepreneurial mind, absolutely. Yeah.
I've kept you.
No, it's been fantastic chatting, Sam. Honestly, it's Yeah, I genuinely love being able to share a bit about what we do and what we do here on the Sunshine Coast. And so I've been asked this a lot lately. Yes, being able to amplify, share all of those buzzwords on what we do. But I think the thing that I've really tapped into and had a deeper understanding of where my skill sets lie recently is the idea of energy and kind of being able to foster and tap into that energy of that coalition of the willing. So, because it's hard. Yeah, a giver, a giver of energy. So I've been very thankful to be able to be involved with, like, as I said, the AgriFutures for All Women's Award alumni, because that is giving back to me energy. So it sounds very woo, but it's
No, I do think people would stop using that because people have no understanding of the immense power that energy that the planet actually operates on.
yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, if you think about it in the regenerative system around, what do they say? Really healthy soil, your roots are so much deeper, and yeah, so there's a lot of correlations there.
One thing you might want to have a look at is James Slattery, who I've done a couple of podcasts with now, who really was the educator and co-founder of natural intelligence farming in West Australia, where the head is. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
And she's really spending time educating farmers on how to find and tap into that, because actually the energy is within you.
Mm.
And whether you talk about it being the land talking to you, it's actually you are part of the land and you feed into it as it feeds into you in a circular system.
Yeah.
And so this energetic field you're talking about, it's like if I sit in front of somebody, I can feel drained from someone. I can feel energized from somebody. It's me. Like then that's my choice to be drained by them.
Yeah.
It's also my choice to be filled with them.
Yeah.
So it's how I choose to have that interactivity. So
Yeah.
choose your fields wisely
Yeah.
and allow those energies to flow through you and with you and amplify the energy you want to have. And I think everybody has experienced that at some point. So it's not woo-woo.
Well, it's incredibly true, actually. It is. And I think it probably goes back to, again, that find your tribe, find that coalition of the willing, foster that to those relationships, and surround yourself with that energy.
So you were primarily only in Queensland, is that right?
So FAN itself is, yes, we've got Queensland businesses. The project work that I'm doing at the moment is with national businesses, and we are working closely with 4 or 5 other groups similar to ours throughout Australia, who have a similar ethos and similar membership model, and who I personally get my energy from when we get together. But yeah, we do operate at that, grassroots level, but then through some of the work and connections, again, at a national level. So,
Okay. Well, I'm going to get you to give me all the links you'd like me to put in the show notes for
yeah.
people. So if there are anywhere in particular that resonates with somebody in whatever part of the place they are, they can link onto that rather than maybe dumping everything on your plate.
Or connect with me on LinkedIn as well. So absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's been so lovely talking to you, and I'm sure we will talk again.
Lovely chatting, Sam. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Integration, where we explore the strategies that connect heart, land, and capital. If today's episode sparks something in you, share it forward. Until next time, stay curious and keep building the world you believe.